The story of the pig baby had reached most of St. Pierron by lunchtime. The bar of Le Coq Rouge saw a constant stream of customers, even though we had little to offer other than chicory coffee. Beer supplies were sporadic, and we had only a few ruinously expensive bottles of wine. It was astonishing how many people called just to wish us good day. "And you tore a strip off him? Told him to go away?" Old Rene, chuckling into his moustache, was clutching the back of a chair and weeping tears of laughter. He had asked to hear the story 4 times now, and with every telling Aurelian had embellished it a little more, until he was fighting off the commandant with a sabre, while cried, "The Kaiser ist Scheiß!" I exchanged a small smile with Helene, who was sweeping the floor of the cafe. I didn't mind. There had been little enough to celebrate in our town lately. "We must be careful," Helene said, as Rene left, lifting his hat in salute. We watched him, convulsed with renewed mirth as he passed the post office, pausing to wipe his eyes. "This story is spreading too far." "Nobody will say anything. Everyone hates the Boche." I shrugged. "Besides, they all want a piece of pork. They're hardly going to inform on us before their food arrives." The pig had been moved discreetly next door in the early hours of the morning. Some months ago, Aurelian, chopping up old beer barrels for firewood, had discovered that the only thing separating the labyrinthine wine cellar from that of the neighbours, the Faubourgs, was a single skin brick wall. We had carefully removed several of the bricks with the Faubourgs' cooperation, and this had become an escape route of the last resort. When the Faubourgs had harboured a young Englishman and the Germans had arrived unannounced at their door at dusk, Madame Faubourg had pleaded incomprehension at the officer's instructions, giving the young man just enough time to sneak down to the cellar and through into our side. They had taken her house to pieces, even looked around the cellar, but in the dim light not one had noticed that the mortar in the wall was suspiciously gappy. This was the story of our lives. Minor insurrections, tiny victories, a brief chance to ridicule our oppressors, little floating vessels of hope amid a great sea of uncertainty, deprivation, and fear. "You met the new commandant, then?" The mayor was seated at one of the tables near the window. As I brought him some coffee, he motioned to me to sit down. More than anyone else's, his life, I often thought, had been intolerable since the occupation. He had spent his time in a constant state of negotiation with the Germans to grant the town what it needed, but periodically they had taken him hostage to force recalcitrant townspeople to do their bidding. "It was not a formal introduction," I said, placing the cup in front of him. He tilted his head towards me, his voice low. "Her baker has been sent back to Germany to run one of the reprisal camps. Apparently there were inconsistencies in his bookkeeping." "That's no surprise. He is the only man in occupied France who has doubled in weight in 2 years." I was joking, but my feelings at his departure were mixed. On the one hand, Baker had been harsh, his punishments excessive, born out of insecurity and fear that his men would not think him strong enough. But he had been too stupid, blind to many of the town's acts of resistance, to cultivate any relationships that might have helped his cause. "So what do you think?" "Of the new commandant? I don't know. He could have been worse, I suppose. He didn't pull the house apart, where Baker might have, just to show his strength. But I wrinkled my nose. He's clever. We might have to be extra careful. As ever, Madame Lefebvre, your thoughts are in harmony with my own. He smiled at me, but not with his eyes. I remembered when the mayor had been a jolly, blustering man, famous for his bonhomie. He'd had the loudest voice at any town gathering. Anything coming this week? I believe there will be some bacon and coffee, very little butter. I hope to have the exact rations later today. We gazed out of the window. Old René had reached the church. He stopped to talk to the priest. It was not hard to guess what they were discussing. When the priest began to laugh and René bent double for the fourth time, I couldn't suppress a giggle. Any news from your husband? I turned back to the mayor. Not since August, when I had a postcard. He was near Amiens. He didn't say much. I think of you day and night, the postcard had said, in his beautiful loopy scrawl. You are my lodestar in this world of madness. I had lain awake for 2 nights worrying after I had received it, until Helene had pointed out that this world of madness might equally apply to a world in which one lived on black bread so hard it required a bill hook to cut it, and kept pigs in a bread oven. The last I received from my eldest son came nearly 3 months ago. They were pushing forward towards Cambrai. Spirits good, he said. I hope they're still good. How is Louisa? Not too bad, thank you. His youngest daughter had been born with a palsy. She failed to thrive, could eat only certain foods, and at 11 was frequently ill. Keeping her well was a preoccupation of our little town. If there was milk or any dried vegetable to be had, a little spare usually found its way to the mayor's house. When she is strong again, tell her Mimi was asking after her. Helene is sewing a doll for her that is to be the exact twin of Mimi's own. She asked that they might be sisters. The mayor patted her hand. You girls are too kind. I thank God that you returned here when you could have stayed in the safety of Paris. Pah, there is no guarantee that the Boche won't be marching down the Champs-Élysées before long. And besides, I could not leave Helene alone here. She could not have survived this without you. You have grown into such a fine young woman. Paris was good for you. My husband is good for me. Then God save him, God save us all. The mayor smiled, placed his hat on his head, and stood up to leave. Saint-Piron, where the Bassett family had run Le Coq Rouge for generations, had been among the first towns to fall to the Germans in the autumn of 1914. Helene and I, our parents long dead and our husbands at the front, had determined to keep the hotel going. We were not alone in taking on men's work. The shops, the local farms, the school were almost entirely run by women, aided by old men and boys. By 1915, there were barely any men left in the town. We did good business in the early months, with French soldiers passing through and the British not far behind. Food was still plentiful, music and cheering accompanied the marching troops, and most of us still believed the war would be over within months, at worst. There were a few hints of the horrors taking place 100 miles away. We gave food to the Belgian refugees who traipsed past, their belongings teetering on wagons. Some were still clad in slippers and the clothes they had worn when they had left their homes. Occasionally, if the wind blew from the east, we could just make out the distant boom of the guns. But although we knew that the war was close by, few believed St. Piron, our proud little town, could possibly join those that had fallen under German rule. Proof of how wrong we had been had come accompanied by the sound of gunfire on a still cold autumn morning, when Madame Fougère and Madame de Rene had set out for their daily 6:45 a.m. stroll to the boulangerie, and were shot dead as they crossed the square. I had pulled back the curtains at the noise, and it had taken me several moments to comprehend what I saw. The bodies of those two women, widows and friends for most of their 70-odd years, sprawled on the pavement, headscarves askew, their empty baskets appended at their feet. A sticky red pool spread around them in an almost perfect circle, as if it had come from one entity. The German officers claimed afterwards that snipers had shot at them and that they had acted in retaliation. Apparently, they said the same of every village they took. If they had wanted to prompt insurrection in the town, they could not have done better than their killing of those old women. But the outrage did not stop there. They set fire to Burns and shot down the statue of Mayor Leclerc. 24 hours later, they marched in formation down our main street, their pickle helmets shining in the wintry sunlight as we stood outside our homes and shops and watched in shocked silence. They ordered the few remaining men outside so that they could count them. The shopkeepers and stallholders simply shut their shops and stalls and refused to serve them. Most of us had stockpiled food. We knew we could survive. I think we believed they might give up, faced with such intransigence, and march on to another village. But then Commandant Becker had decreed that any shopkeeper who failed to open during normal working hours would be shot. One by one, the boulangerie, the boucherie, the market stalls, and even Le Coq Rouge reopened. Reluctantly, our little town was prodded back into sullen, mutinous life. 18 months on, and there was little left to buy. St. Piron was cut off from its neighbours, deprived of news and dependent on the regular delivery of aid, supplemented by costly black market provisions when they were available. Sometimes it was hard to believe that free France knew what we were suffering. The Germans were the only ones who ate well. Their horses, our horses, were sleek and fat, and ate the crushed wheat that should have been used to make our bread. They raided our wine cellars and took the food produced by our farms. And it wasn't just food. Every week someone would get the dreaded knock on the door, and a new list of items would be requisitioned. Teaspoons, cartons, dinner plates, saucepans, blankets. Occasionally, an officer would inspect first, note what was desirable, and return with a list specifying exactly that. They would write promissory notes, which could supposedly be exchanged for money. Not a single person in St. Piron knew anyone who had actually been paid. "What are you doing?" "I'm moving this." I took the portrait and moved it to a quiet corner, less in public gaze. "Who is it?" Aurelian asked as I rehung it, adjusting it on the wall until it was straight. "It's me." I turned to him. "Can you not tell?" "Oh." He squinted. He wasn't trying to insult me. The girl in the painting was very different from the thin, severe woman, grey of complexion, with very tired eyes, who stared back at me daily from the looking glass. I tried not to glimpse her too often. Did Edward do it? Yes, when we were married. I've never seen his paintings. It's not what I expected. What do you mean? Well, it's strange. The colors are strange. He has put green and blue in your skin. People don't have green and blue skin. And look, it's messy. He has not kept within the lines. Aurelian, come here. I walked to the window. Look at my face. What do you see? A gargoyle. I cuffed him. No, look, really look at the colors of my skin. You're just pale. Look harder, under my eyes, in the hollows of my throat. Don't tell me what you expect to see. Really look, and then tell me what colors you actually see. My brother stared at my throat. His gaze traveled slowly around my face. I see blue, he said, under your eyes. Blue and purple. And yes, green running down your neck. And orange. Alas, call the doctor. Your face is a million different colors. You're a clown. We are all clowns, I said. Edward just sees it more clearly than everyone else. Aurelian raced upstairs to inspect himself in the looking-glass and torment himself about the blues and purples he would no doubt find. Not that he needed much excuse these days. He was sweet on at least 2 girls and spent much time shaving his soft juvenile skin with our father's blunt old cut-throat razor in a vain attempt to hasten the process of aging. It's lovely, Helene said, standing back to look at it. But what? It is a risk to have it up at all. When the Germans went through Lille, the burned art they considered subversive. Edward's painting is very different. How do you know they won't destroy it? She worried, Helene. She worried about Edward's paintings and our brother's temper. She worried about the letters and diary entries I wrote on scraps of paper and stuffs into the holes in the beams. I want it down here, where I can see it. Don't worry, the rest are safe in Paris. She didn't look convinced. I want color, Helene. I want life. I don't want to look at Napoleon or Papa's stupid pictures of mournful dogs. And I won't let them... I nodded outside to where off-duty German soldiers were smoking by the town fountain. Decide what I may look at in my own home. Helene shook her head, as if I were a fool she might have to indulge. And then she went to serve Madame Louvier and Madame Durand, who, although they had often observed that my chicory coffee tasted as if it had come from the sewer, had arrived to hear the story of the pig baby. Helene and I shared bed that night, flanking Mimi and Jo. Sometimes it was so cold, even in October, that we feared we would find them frozen solid in their nightclothes. So we all huddled up together. It was late, but I knew my sister was awake. The moonlight shone through the gap in the curtains, and I could just see her eyes, wide open, fixed on a distant point. I guessed that she was wondering where her husband was at the very moment, whether he was warm, belated somewhere like our home, or freezing in a trench gazing up at the same moon. In the far distance, a muffled boom told of some far-off battle. Sophie? Yes? We spoke in the quietest of whispers. Do you ever wonder what it will be like if they do not come back? I lay there in the darkness. No, I lied, because I know they will come back, and I do not want the Germans to have gleaned even one more minute of fear from me. I do, she said. Sometimes I forget what he looks like. I gaze at his photograph, and I can't remember anything. It's because you look at it so often. Sometimes I think we wear our photographs out by looking at them. But I can't remember anything. How he smells, how his voice sounds. I can't remember how he feels beside me. It's as if he never existed. And then I think, what if this is it? What if he never comes back? What if we are to spend the rest of our lives like this, our every move determined by men who hate us? And then I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can. I propped myself up on one elbow and reached over Mimi and Jo to take my sister's hand. Yes, you can, I said. Of course you can. Jean-Michel will come home and your life will be good. France will be free and life will be as it was, better than it was. She lay there in silence. I was shivering now, out from under the blankets, but I dared not move. My sister frightened me when she spoke like this. It was as if there was a whole world of terrors inside her head, and she had to battle against twice as hard as the rest of us. Her voice was small, tremulous, as if she were fighting back tears. Do you know, after I married Jean-Michel, I was so happy. I was free for the first time in my life. I knew what she meant. Our father had been quick with his belt and sharp with his fists. The town believed him to be the most benign of landlords, a pillar of the community, good old François Bassett, always ready with a joke and glass. But we knew the ferocity of his temper. Our only regret was that our mother had gone before him, so that she could have enjoyed a few years out of its shadow. It feels like we have exchanged one bully for another. Sometimes I suspect I will spend my whole life bent to somebody else's will. You, Sophie, I see you laughing. I see you determined, so brave, putting up paintings, shouting at Germans, and I do not understand where it comes from. I can't remember what it was like not to be afraid. We lay there in silence. I could hear my heart thumping. She believed me fearless, but nothing frightened me as much as my sister's fears. There was a new fragility about her these last months, a new strain around her eyes. I squeezed her hand. She did not squeeze back. Between us, Mimi stirred, throwing an arm over her head. Helene relinquished my hand, and I could just make out her shape as she moved on to her side, and gently tucked her daughter's arm back under the covers. Oddly reassured by this gesture, I lay down again, pulling the blankets up to the chin to stop myself shivering. Pork, I said, into the silence. What? Just think about it. Roast pork, the skin rubbed with salt and oil, cooked until it snaps between your teeth. Think of the soft folds of warm white fat, the pink meat shredding softly between your fingers, perhaps with compote of apple. That is what we will eat in a matter of weeks, Helene. Think of how good it will taste. Pork? Yes, pork. When I feel myself waver, I think of that pig and its big fat belly. I think of its crisp little ears, its moist haunches. I almost heard her smile. Sophie, you're mad. But think of it, Helene. Won't it be good? Can you imagine Mimi's face with pork fat dribbling down her chin? How it will feel in her little tummy? Can you imagine her pleasure as she tries to remove bits of cracking from between her teeth? She laughed, despite herself. I'm not sure she remembers how pork tastes. It won't take much to remind her, I said. Just like it won't take much to remind you of Jean-Michel. One of these days he will walk through the doors, and you will throw your arms around him, and the smell of him, the feel of him holding you right around your waist will be as familiar to you as your own body. I could almost hear her thoughts travelling back upwards then. I had pulled her back. Little victories. Sophie, she said after a while, do you miss sex? Every single day, I said, twice as often as I think about that pig. There was a brief silence, and we broke into giggles. Then I don't know why we were laughing so hard we had to clamp our hands over our faces to stop ourselves waking the children. I knew the commandant would return. In the event, it was 4 days before he did so. It was raining hard, a deluge, so that our few customers sat over empty cups, gazing unseeing through the steamed windows. In the snug, old Rene and Monsieur Pellier played dominoes. Monsieur Pellier's dog, he had to pay the Germans a tariff for the privilege of owning it between their feet. Many people sat here daily so that they did not have to be alone with their fear. I was just admiring Madame Arnold's hair, newly pinned by my sister, when the glass doors opened and he stepped into the bar, flanked by 2 officers. The room, which had been a warm fog of chatty companionability, fell abruptly silent. I stepped out from behind the counter and wiped my hands on my apron. Germans did not visit our bar, except for requisitioning. They used the bar Blanc at the top of the town, which was larger and possibly friendlier. We had always made it very clear that we were not a convivial space for the occupying force. I wondered what they were going to take from us now. If we had any fewer cups and plates, we would have to ask customers to share. Madame Lefebvre? I nodded at him. I could feel my customers' eyes on me. It has been decided you will provide meals for some of our officers. There is not enough room in the Bar Blanc for our incoming men to eat comfortably. I could see him clearly for the first time now. He was older than I had thought, in his late 40s perhaps, although with fighting men it was hard to tell. They all looked older than they were. I'm afraid that will be impossible, Herr Commandant, I said. We have not served meals at this hotel for more than 18 months. We have barely enough provisions to feed our small family. We cannot possibly provide meals to the standard that your men will require. I'm well aware of that. There will be sufficient supplies delivered from early next week. I will expect you to turn out meals suitable for officers. I understand this hotel was once a fine establishment. I'm sure it lies within your capabilities. I heard my sister's intake of breath behind me, and I knew she felt as I did. The visceral dread of having Germans in our little hotel was tempered by the thought that for months had overridden all others. Food. There would be leftovers, bones with which to make stock. There would be cooking smells, stolen mouthfuls, extra rations, slices of meat and cheese to be secretly paired off. But still, I'm not sure our bar will be suitable for you, Her Commandant. We are stripped of comforts here. I will be the judge of where my men will be comfortable. I would like to see your rooms also. I may billet some of my men up here. I heard old Rene mutter, Sacre bleu! You are welcome to see the rooms, Her Commandant, but you will find that your predecessors have left us with little. The beds, the blankets, the curtains, even the copper piping that fed the basins, they are already in German possession. I knew I risked angering him. I had made clear in a packed bird that the commandant was ignorant of the actions of his own men, that his intelligence, as far as it stretched to our town, was faulty, but it was vital that my own townspeople saw me as obstinate and mulish. To have Germans in our bar would make Helene and me the target of gossip, of malicious rumour. It was important that we were seen to do all we could to deter them. Again, madame, I will be the judge of whether your rooms are suitable. Please show me. He motioned to his men to remain in the bar. It would be completely silent until after they had left. I straightened my shoulders and walked slowly out into the hallway, reaching for the keys as I did so. I felt the eyes of the whole room on me as I left, my skirt swishing around my legs, the heavy steps of the German behind me. I unlocked the door to the main corridor. I kept everything locked. It was not unknown for French thieves to steal what had not already been requisitioned by the Germans. This part of the building smelt musty and damp. It was months since I had been here. We walked up the stairs in silence. I was grateful that he remained several steps behind me. I paused at the top, waiting for him to step into the corridor, then unlocked the first room. There had been a time when merely to see our hotel like this had reduced me to tears. The Red Room had once been the pride of Le Coq Rouge, the bedroom where my sister and I had spent our wedding nights, the room where the mayor would put up visiting dignitaries. It had housed a vast four-poster bed, draped in blood-red tapestries, and its generous window overlooked our formal gardens. The carpet was from Italy, the furniture from a chateau in Gascony, the coverlet a deep red silk from China. It had held a gilt chandelier and a huge marble fireplace, where the fire was lit each morning by a chambermaid and kept alight until night. I opened the door, standing back so that the German might enter. The room was empty, but for a chair that stood on three legs in the corner. The floorboards had been stripped of their carpet and were grey, thick with dust. The bed was long gone, with the curtains, among the first things stolen when the Germans had taken our town. The marble fireplace had been ripped from the wall. For what reason I do not know. It was not as if it could be used elsewhere. I think Becker had simply wanted to demoralize us, to remove all things of beauty. He took a step into the room. Be careful where you walk, I said. He glanced down, then saw it, the corner of the room where they had attempted to remove the floorboards for firewood last spring. The house had been too well built, its boards nailed too securely, and they had given up after several hours when they had removed just 3 long planks. The whole, a gaping O of protest, exposed the beams beneath. The commandant stood for a minute, staring at the floor. He lifted his head and gazed around him. I had never been alone in a room with a German, and my heart was thumping. I could smell the faint hint of tobacco on him, see the rain splashes on his uniform. I watched the back of his neck, and eased my keys between my fingers, ready to hit him with my armored fist should he suddenly attack me. I would not be the first woman who had had to fight for her honor. But he turned back to me. "Are they all as bad?" he said. "No," I replied. "The others are worse." He looked at me for such a long time that I almost colored. But I refused to let that man intimidate me. I stared back at him, at his cropped graying hair, his translucent blue eyes studying me from under his peaked cap. My chin remained lifted, my expression blank. Finally, he turned and walked past me, down the stairs and into the back hallway. He stopped abruptly, peered up at my portrait and blinked twice, as if he were only now registering that I had moved it. "I will have someone inform you of when to expect the first delivery of food," he said. He went briskly through the doorway and back to the bar.